If you are new to Cincinnati or St. Bernard, Ohio, or maybe you've been around for a while, but you've been yearning for a faith community that does things differently. And I think we all know what differently means, right? In this world that we live in, a faith community that is willing to live out the true genuine article type of Jesus Christ agape love, a church community that will do the hard reconciliation work, a church community that is open, affirming, inclusive, a church community who will love you for who you are wherever you are on life's journey, and not in a lip service sort of way. This church, Emmanuel United Church of Christ, we are decentering Sunday morning worship that is so comfortable, and we are recentering mission and service, which is a form of worship. It's a form of worship that Jesus taught us how to pray, right? If you're looking for that radically inclusive and extravagantly welcoming community of faith believers, check out Emmanuel United Church of Christ.
Well, and for those of you who've been with us, you know that we've been doing a sermon series about our General Synod, which is the big denominational gathering where we make all the big main decisions and vote and debate and do all that fun stuff. And so we've been having I've been bringing General Synod back with us to talk about actually what's happening in our denomination. Now I want you to pay close attention to the actual message titles I've been giving you, because I've been kind of doing with them, because I'm kind of a dork that way. So we began August with the message called God's Making All Things New, which was the message of the General Synod. That was the overall theme. But then after that, our first week was Just Listen. Our second week was When We Listen. And today is We Can Love Beyond the Law. Just listen. Because when we listen to each other, we can love even beyond the law. Now, what do I say or mean when I say that we can love beyond the law? I mean, the first week we talked about the spirit of the law over the letter of the law. Well, that's not exactly what we're talking about this morning. Instead, what we're talking about is what we have found to be a dogmatic, if not legalistic approach to our faith tradition that has been encroaching on the ethos of our church for over 500 years. Just that, a dogmatic approach to Jesus, a legalistic approach to our scriptures, and in doing so, our faith has turned from an orientation of forgiveness and grace to an orientation of justice. Now, when I say justice, I'm not talking this morning about Martin Luther King Jr. justice. I'm not talking about William Arbor justice. I'm not not talking about Tracy Blackman justice. I'm not even talking about UCC justice. I'm talking about the legal justice, the lady with the scales, that kind of justice. And our approach at fitting our faith tradition into the justice system and that which is the law, which Jesus and the prophets spent their entire lifetime trying to get us to get away from these sorts of ideals, which is truly horrifying in a Western Christian tradition that already misses the point. That already misses the point that this teachings, the ministries of Jesus, was supposed to be about the salvation of the least of these. And if we have a role in such scriptures, that our role is actually how to help bring paradise to the least of these in the marginalized among us. But instead, we've turned everything upside down to this self-centric view of Jesus and our faith tradition, as to say, what can this Jesus guy, what can this Palestinian brown-skinned man do for me? You see what happens there? Do you see what happens with faith tradition where we flip the message like that? Now, I love what Jesus can do for me, but what Jesus can do for us is so much more important and should be the guiding principle to every time we gather, every time we meet, every time we share a meal, break bread together, or fill out one of those hours. 700 hours of congregation, over 700 hours this year. Hours of service and mission to the community. Thank you. You made me proud. But we can keep going. The ironic part, because that's not even the ironic part. The ironic part isn't that we miss the point where the true gospel is about how we can help others, and instead we make it about ourselves. The ironic part is that in doing so, we full stop center our faith tradition on our very specific individual sense of that cosmic salvation that we talked about before. Which, if we are going to center that, then it also should come with the understanding that the center of this atonement theory of forgiveness, or theology of forgiveness, is unwarranted and undeserved. We as Christians love to say that. I'm saved even though I don't deserve it. We love to say that. We love to point that fact out. But if that is the center of our faith, then what does it mean for the Christian tradition and the Christian faith that then doesn't extend that same grace to others? It's like running into like a point and then breaking your nose on it because you miss it so bad. Friends, if God is making all things new, and if God is still speaking, then maybe it's time for us to actually listen. Because our sense of justice is not the same as God's. My sense of justice is not the same as God. Not when we call it corrective justice, but put people in private prisons, which, by the way, the only purpose for having a private prison is to make money off of bodies. Do you think that our private prison industrial complex wants restorative justice? Or do they make money off heads and beds? Do you think that they actually try to get people to change and transform? Or are they kind of hoping that they mess up again so that they can come right back in and work for money? When someone overdoses and someone suggests Narcan, but we say something like, just let them die, it's their fault that they're now. Does that really mirror what Jesus said on the cross to the people responsible for his very own murder when he said, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing? Because even if you want justice, this legalistic sense of justice, justice can't be served to someone who's dead. If that's your bad, if that's your thing. And we certainly can't serve grace and reconciliation and repentance to somebody who has passed. If you are a Christian, you need to hear this message that people who do the hardest of drugs are beloved children of God, even while they are shooting up. Even while they're breaking our beloved law, they are beloved children of God. At the General Synod, we learned about a resolution of harm reduction. According to the CDC, in a one-year period that ended in April 2021, America lost about 100,000 souls to overdose. Now, as we know, the national response to overdose crises and local response to overdose crises is to criminalize and dehumanize. Criminalize and dehumanize the people who use drugs. According to the authors of this resolution, know that there is another way. There is another way to promote love. And that is the way of harm reduction. Everybody say that. Harm reduction.
Harm reduction.
Shouldn't that be our goal in everything we do? Harm reduction has been proven to save lives, heal communities, and is positively transforming social narratives and policies, even on drugs, and especially the beloved children of God who use them. Now, one of the practices, all right, we're going there. One of the practices of harm reduction is the implementation of what are called clean needle programs. Clean needle programs. If you don't know what a clean needle program is, it's where drug addicts can actually turn their dirty needles in, their syringes in, and get brand new, fresh, clean needles. Yes, to shoot up drugs again. Now, for many of us, our first thought is, what? In what world is that okay? In what world is giving addicts more needles in syringes good and holy? You want us to enable this toxic behavior that's breaking the law and injecting more toxins into their systems? What in the world are we talking about? Dear friends, just listen one more time. Because we really need to challenge ourselves in a big way. We need to love beyond the law. Which, by the way, we don't talk about the law this way. The law is the bare minimum standard for living in society. You know that, right? It's the difference between freedom and bars. So we love and cherish the law, but it's not even the model for how we should live as a society. It's the bare minimum standard that keeps you out of the bars. To love beyond the law and to lead beyond the law and the bare minimum with what? Love, grace, and compassion, forgiveness. Sound familiar? Even to the people who don't deserve it. Especially the people who don't deserve it, right? If that's the center of our faith tradition. Now, even if we want to lead with a legalistic justice standpoint, the data is actually out. If compassion is not your thing, the data is out. The evidence is actually quite clear from over 30 years of research on clean needle programs. Because the number one cause of HIV and hepatitis C transmission is due to dirty needles in the streets. Clean needle programs don't just reduce the transmission of these diseases, which, by the way, if this is your thing, saves you money as a taxpayer, because it's a heck of a lot cheaper to treat somebody with a drug addiction than it is to treat somebody with a drug addiction and HIV. And then it's also passing HIV. So if the only thing you care about is your tax dollars, this is also for you too. But more importantly, because the clean needle programs also come with the resources and a safe space to ask questions and to even seek out help. Yes, even with the needle currently in their arm, we have love. Someone in the weirdest of ways. It's clear I'm not advocating that churches become clean needle programs. That's not what this is about. This is simply to ask the UCC to support harm reduction programs like this. Because recipients of clean needle programs are 5 times, not 5%, 5 times more likely to enter treatment. And 3 times more likely to reduce and to stop drug use. Not 3%, 3 times. 90% of their dirty needles come back to the clinics, make it off their streets, as opposed to 100% of their dirty needles staying in the streets. Yes, beloved, doing drugs is a bad thing. I grew up there. It's a bad thing to do. It's an illegal thing to do. It's against the law. But that, as with the law, should be the bare minimum view of how we approach addiction in those who are addicted. when we are called to love even more fiercely above the simple fact that drugs are bad and drugs are good. To love the addict even as they are self-harming. Ooh, that's a challenge for some of us. To love the addict even while they are breaking the law. Or else we need to give up on this sense of forgiveness when we don't deserve it. We need to stop calling it restorative justice, because what we really care about is justice without the redemption, which is really just wrath and vengeance, which is not just. Absolutely, God is a just God. Jesus is a just Christ. But we need to ask ourselves, what the still speaking God believes about justice when there are 127 passages in there about forgiveness? What does the God of justice actually believe in when our faith hinges on the forgiveness of ourselves when we don't deserve it? In order for God to make all things new, we have to make a pivot in our faith tradition. We have to make a change. No matter what Christian orthodoxy teaches us, to instead just read what's written and to believe in what's written. Matthew 6, for if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. Colossians 3, bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. Ephesians 4, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as Christ God forgave you. Luke 6, do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Matthew 18, when Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Like 7 times? That's a lot, right? Jesus says 77 times. Mark 11 says, and when you stand praying, if you hold anything against anyone, forgive them, so that your Father in heaven may forgive you. Psalms 103. We're going Old Testament now. Let's kick it old school. As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions against us. Shall I keep going? Because with his dying breath, the man on the cross died after being tortured, and he uses his last final moments on this earth to say, forgive my murderers and those who have condemned me, for they don't know what they are doing. And then to say to the condemned, convicted, and sentenced criminal next to him, today you will be in paradise with me. Today, this day. Now, what does a just God believe in that context? God is making all things new, and it starts with forgiveness. So our start as followers begins with what? Forgiveness. To forgive those who transgress against us. We pray every Sunday. To stop casting judgment. To instead love them beyond what even our sense of justice looks like. Now I understand that that's hard. I understand that it is challenging. If it was easy, we wouldn't have needed Jesus to come into this earth to show us how to live another way, would we? I understand that it might not be like you just heard what I said, and you're still like, I'm still not for it, and that just doesn't sound like me. We may not even like it. Russell Moore, the editor-in-chief, this is somebody I never thought I'd quote here, the editor-in-chief of Christianity Today, someone who likely would never come to UCC Church, had this to say in an NPR interview just last week, that multiple pastors had told him they would quote the Sermon on the Mount, specifically the part that says to turn the other cheek when preaching. Someone would come up to the service and ask, where did you get these level of talking points? What was alarming to me is that in most of these scenarios, when the pastor would say, I'm literally just quoting Jesus Christ, the response would not be, oh, I apologize. The response would be, yes, that doesn't work anymore. That's weak. When we get to the point where the teachings of Jesus himself are seen as subversive to us, then we are in a crisis. The teachings of Jesus Christ are indeed subversive and countercultural, but if they become subversive and countercultural to the followers of Christ, we are indeed in a crisis. As religion, we've been lost for quite some time, to the point where Christians are now calling the teachings of Christ himself weak. But here's the thing about crisis. In times of crises, heroes emerge. Those who will stand up for what is right, who demonstrate courage by offering forgiveness in the face of darkness. I'm going to nerd out here. It brings me to mind Lord of the Rings when Sam says to Frodo, there's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for. And like, all right, that's fine. And you know what? Sometimes that fight is internal. It's a shift that has to happen from within us before it can change outside of us. Sometimes we have to rise above ourselves and even our gut reactions. Because what good is our gut reaction in the eyes of the one who knows to be Jesus when we celebrate someone who gets sober and clean, but blatantly state that we're okay with them dying while they're not? How can we celebrate nicotine addicts when they get a patch? Like, good job, they quit smoking, but then don't look for adaptive solutions for those who are just happy to be on heroin instead? Or to blanket oppose the distribution of Narcan because they shouldn't have gotten on drugs in the first place, when we know what the pharmaceutical industry has done to our citizens. I've met with a person who had to be revived 5 different times before they were able to get clean. Is the Christian stance really that those 5 doses were a waste? Are we a people of resurrection and forgiveness of sins or not? Are we a people of resurrection for those who don't deserve it, including yourself, or not? This is where the true test of our faith lies, in practicing what we preach, and living out transformative message of love and forgiveness that Jesus exemplified. And it's called a test for a reason. Because in this test, we find our personal limits, where our compassion and grace stops. We find that the question isn't whether or not you have limits. You have limits. I love you, but you have limits. I have limits to my grace and compassion. I got cut off. I got cut off in the collar, and they looked over me, and I looked over at them, and I was like, and he kind of looked at me like, oh crap, I did that to that person. And I kind of felt good. It shouldn't have felt good. I have my limits too. The question isn't whether or not you have limits. The question is whether or not you're going to receive the call to go above your own limits then. To really seek out what Christ is asking us to do in this world. In harm reduction, we find a profound lesson. It's not about ignoring wrongdoing. It's not about advocating to just keep shooting up heroin. It's about recognizing that every single person, regardless of their past or present, has the capacity for change and redemption. Just as God extends forgiveness to us, even when we don't deserve it. Are we not called to extend that same grace, especially when it's difficult for us to do so? So don't be compartmentalized with your gut reaction to your faith. Sometimes you have to follow your gut. I understand that. I'm a gut follower. You know that. I have to say sorry a lot. But don't always let your gut get in the way with Jesus. Step beyond our boundaries, our limits, our comfort zones, and embrace a radical love that uplifts and restores the most least of these. For in doing so, and only in doing so, we can truly embody the transformative power of God's genuine agape love. And in doing so, we contribute to this revolution. This radical revolution of God's love in our communities. Even if it starts with forgiving ourselves and noticing our limits and forgiving ourselves first. That's how we love the world. It's not to Holy God, we thank you for the times that we come into this space to be challenged. Challenge our faith, our witness, our limits. Those times when we get into our pews and we start to sweat a little. Wonder where you're taking us, God. For it's in these moments that we can grow. We can't grow through our comfort. We can't even grow through our limits. We can only grow through seeking out your love in everything that we do. Beyond what we do. As a church, as an individual, as a beloved child of God. May we so. Amen. And now I invite you to stand as you are able as we sing our next hymn. Lord God, faithful and gracious things that we are so.
And welcome to Emmanuel United Church of Christ online. Consider taking your next step by following us on one of our social media platforms, or consider visiting us in person. We are an open, affirming, inclusive, and reconciling congregation, and we are all so glad that you are here.